Hola gente, hola seguidores del grupo Grite. Estamos acá en otro encuentro y nuevamente tenemos un invitado especial. En este caso, nada más ni nada menos, nada más ni nada menos que uno de mis dibujantes favoritos. Una persona cuyo trabajo puedo mirar y admirar horas. Es un placer, un verdadero placer tener como invitado al gran, great Kelley Jones. Incredible artist. He is a pleasure. And we promise we will behave. Sure about that. Um,
Don't don't be excited too much.
I
But
will.
yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. The Cape Crusader with the very long ears and these you know topsy-turvy cape is amazing.
Thank you.
I do love um, I grew up as um, a boy watching the Batman camp of Adam West and um, the TV series. But I remember my daughter said once, uh, "Why your Batman?" I have, of course, the action figure. Why your Batman is blue and yellow if it is black? Yes, it is black now. When I was a child, is blue and yellow.
Yeah,
And I show her one of your
work.
drawings, and I said, "And what do you think about this Batman?" And he said, "Oh my gosh, it's kind of vampire."
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. It
Mhm.
is the bad words. It was as people in Gotham City and even the villains thought about Batman like another villain. So
Mhm.
you I think you finally, among all the old monsters who draw Batman, but you finally caught the real thing about the Cape Crusader, going into the deep personality of some, you can say that somebody with two faces, or a really psychiatric
Yeah.
situation, or uh, because this is the real one. So
Mhm.
we all three of all, we do love this version of yours, and we are very grateful of having you here to give us your insight and all we can drain of your knowledge about writing horror stories and drawing not only Batman, Sandman, and everything.
Right.
So, without further ado, and once again, really being honored of having you in our home. Let's, Fernando, if you please, with our first question.
Yes, thanks. Mi primera pregunta es, ¿cuál es la formación académica que Kelley Jones, cuál fue la educación formal de Kelley Jones como artista? ¿Dónde estudió dibujo, si es que estudió de alguna manera formal?
Fernando would like to know if you have a formal education as an artist, and if it is the case, where did you study drawing or fine arts or wherever?
Uh, I don't have any truly formal education in how to draw. I took some art classes, but but I wasn't interested in what they were teaching. Where I did really learn to draw comics wasn't from comics itself, it was from taking film courses. And they would say in a film course, which is very similar in storytelling to, for example, comic book art, uh, they would say how shots are set or how you create atmosphere in a film. And so I could see the parallel to doing comics. More, it was more liberating than an art class because I had to translate how to take the language of film and put it on paper. And one of the things that it did was it gave me different influences, uh, like a Stanley Kubrick or a David Lynch or someone like that, and bring that kind of aesthetic to a comic book. And rather than, if I had taken art, it would have been the rules of how you draw. Those rules, technical rules. Film is more ideas and dreams. And so when I was able to allow, in my career, when I reached a point where I finally decided to let that be my influence, it changed my presentation and how I would tell a story. So they became more personal. It became my dreams rather than, for example, with Batman, uh, rather than draw him as a standard kind of superhero, I started to think, well, what would it be like to be afraid of him? Not him, not how to be him, but what would scare me about him? And I began to realize that in drawing, you're allowed to see the drawing for a long time. In a film, you just can see a shape or an image very briefly. How much visual information do you get for it? So I became darker because I didn't want the victims of Batman or the people he had to confront. I didn't want them to see too much of him. So he became a silhouette, a shape, something that would frighten someone. I thought most sane people would only want to see Batman once and would stop whatever he was telling you not to do. The regular villains were insane, so they didn't have the same reaction to it. I started to think, well, how would it be if I lived in a city like that? Rather than how do I show it, how would it be? And it would be one where I wouldn't know Batman's a good guy. I would think he's a villain too, and that the villains are fighting for their territory. That if they do the bat signal, it's a warning, not a call for help. And that is where my ideas that's how it took over. And then it changed my presentation of Batman to where I thought it was more personal and more unique. And in a sense, it's influenced a lot of other artists in there when they've seen that yes, treat him that way, and there's more dimension to exploring his real power, which is fear.
Okay.
I would like to re-ask, when you present your personal view of the Cape Crusader, like the first time I saw your drawings of Batman, I think, I thought in a movie of Kurosawa, The Shadow of the Warrior, in was the translation in Spanish.
Yeah.
So it was like the warrior, but you don't see me, but my shadow.
Right.
So what was the reaction of the company when you offer or you present this particular way of understanding the superhero that now is kinda a super villain?
Well, yes. At first, I see. I didn't go and tell DC Comics, I was going to do this. I figured if they like it, they'll they'll say, okay, keep doing it. If they don't, they'll say, stop it. If I tell them, they may say, don't do that. So it's easier to apologize for something than ask permission.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
This is my motto.
yeah. So I did it thinking, well, if the people who work at DC, the editors and the publishers respond to this by either liking it or letting me continue, then I had a good idea that the fans and the readers would respond similarly. That they would have that I could gauge the reaction with them who saw it first, the writers and all that. I never said I'm going to do this strange cape and these long ears. But if they asked me why I was doing it, I would have to have an answer rather than just style. I had to tell them because in an alley, he would be more frightening with all of this than if he looked like a regular person. I wanted it to be, is he a regular person? What is he? Because of this strange shadow silhouette that he would present to the regular people. Though the comics would spend their time on him dealing with the villains, I also used to say to the writers and to the publishers, he's off camera, he's dealing with regular criminals, regular thieves, regular murderers. And so he doesn't want them to do this again, so that this is this threat, that he would present himself as this threat, that he would be in a room with you not knowing for 10 minutes, that he would look like this, that he wouldn't say too much other than stop it, or I know, or I'm watching, which is a lot more frightening than, to me, him just showing up and you saw all the details. I was very lucky in that that I got to start doing Batman the way I wanted to, and I didn't have to evolve him. And I was very lucky that the people there, Denny O'Neil and Archie Goodwin, the people in charge of Batman at the time, very strongly reacted to it in the positive. And I didn't want to look like the other great artists who'd done it before because that's already been done. And the only way you can really compete with a great artist, say like a Neil Adams or a Marshall Rogers or one of those, is not draw like them. You have to come from here. And the only thing I had that I felt could compete was my ideas. And I've had the good fortune of Neil Adams telling me how much he enjoyed my version quite a bit. That he felt it was a very strong take. Now, I never knew that. I didn't know that was going to happen. I did it for myself because I had to have a different point of view than everybody else. But it worked, and
Absolutely.
it was something that if you have a good idea or if you have something very personal, then the work doesn't become dated. It doesn't become tied to the time it was made. It will last and last and last. And that's what I tell a lot of young artists or writer or anyone. You want to draw from your soul. And that will make then I didn't want someone to look at me technically and say, well, did he get the perspective right? Or did he get this part right? I'll break every rule to get my emotion or the energy or the excitement on a page. And I don't care what the technical stuff is. Learning a rule is very hard because then you have to learn to break the rule. So if you can solve your own problems, you create a style and whatnot. The only rule you have to follow is be on time.
Oh, yeah.
Give them the work on time so they can't say anything but, yes, you're on time. And then you get a lot of credit. In publishing, you have to be on time. So I was always on time. I would turn an issue in on time. I would turn in whatever the amount the book was on time, but it would look like me. And they give you a lot of credit if they don't have to worry where a book is. And that helped me too. So that's the only rule is be professional in getting your work done, be a dreamer in doing the work.
Excellent. Excellent. Fernando.
Ahora sí, tu primer trabajo profesional fue en Marvel, The Micronauts. Reemplazaste a Jackson Butch Case y tu estilo era parecido al dibujante anterior en The Micronauts. Mi pregunta es, ¿tu estilo personal no estaba aún del todo desarrollado o intentaste seguir ese estilo de dibujo para formar un puente entre ambos dibujantes?
Fernando referred to your first work that it was for
The Micronauts.
Marvel, the Micronauts.
Yeah.
And he said that your style was not yet fully developed, and it connects very well with the previous artists of the series,
Yeah.
Jackson Butch guys.
Yeah. Guys, yeah.
Yes, guys. And he said that he found the both works very similar, and he asked, or he wondered if it was on purpose, intentional, or were you trying to stand to emulate the previous artists to make a bridge between the two styles? So it was intentional.
Yeah.
Was part of
Well, when I was hired to do the Micronauts, I originally was hired to be the inker.
Yes.
And work with Jackson. So I had done that. Really, I was still going to school. I was very, very young when I got it. So I was thrown into the world of producing a monthly comic or a bi-monthly comic, but they were big, and they really liked my inking on it. And so I thought that's what I would do while I went to school. It would pay for going to school. And as time went on, Jackson had informed me that he was going to leave the book. So I thought my job was over on that and whatnot. They did look for other artists, but the editor on the book didn't find anyone that he felt would fit. My sample art that I'd sent like a few years earlier, I didn't really draw comic book pages. I drew pictures and then I would ink them. So I didn't really have a lot of traditional storytelling. It was like I said, they were all these bizarre ideas of mine. When I told the editor I don't draw comic books, I ink them, but I really don't know if I can draw them yet. I was still only maybe 20 years old. So 20, 21 years old. I was pretty young. And he said, we'll send you the scripts. You draw them. Don't worry about how you know to do them or not. I'll tell you what to do. But I want to see what you can draw, and I think I'm going to give you the job. Well, most people would be very happy. I was scared because I didn't really know how to do this yet. And I think when I finished the first issue I ever drew of the Micronauts was the most comic book art I'd ever produced in my life. So what the main thing that happened was they would tell me what to do. They said, we want you to try to follow suit with the styles that have been established. So, but the good thing was the writer came out and was very science fiction oriented rather than superhero. So that gave me a little more room. Horror comics or science fiction comics have different tropes, different ideas, different visual cues that superhero comics have. So you can be more inventive and explore more, and that's what I got in those scripts. So I had to keep the look of a science fiction world, but I was allowed to be more adventurous. Um, the funny part, though, was when I had asked to ink my own comics there, they wouldn't let me do it. I was hired as an inker, but I wasn't allowed to ink my own work. So, and that kind of held me back a little bit because um, I do a lot of drawing with ink. I do a lot of where I leave it open so I can have something exciting happen. And that's when I went to DC, that was really the only reason. I was very successful at Marvel, but I didn't get to be myself. And so when DC hired me, they had no idea that I wanted to do horror comics. They had no idea that I had all these thoughts in my head. They just wanted me to do what I was doing. They'd offered me things like Teen Titans and stuff like that, and I just didn't want to do that. I didn't feel I was the perfect fit, and I felt there were better people to do it. And just by chance, before I got to say the kind of subjects I wanted to handle, that's when they sent to me Dead Man. And I did not, again, tell them what I was going to do with Dead Man. It was just the ideas. And and it's what I always tell young artists, uh, show everyone what you can do, but don't tell anyone how you come to that, because you don't want them to stereotype or pigeonhole you or say this is what kind of artist you are. I was thought of as a science fiction kind of superhero artist. No one would have given me a horror comic book. If I asked, they wouldn't have, because they couldn't see it. When they did give it to me, and then I turned what they thought was a kind of a superhero supernatural thing into pure horror, it changed that character. And I thought they were going to fire me, but that's a good feeling if you're doing it from the heart and they're going to fire you. Okay, that's okay, because it's who I am, and I can accept people not wanting that. I can accept people not never be afraid someone's going to not like your work or like what you do. It's okay. Um, so when it turned out that they did like it, uh, at that point, I felt very good that my influences were filmmakers and directors and people in the world of cinema, because that's how their journeys would go. They would be hired a certain way, and then they had to work until they got to do their own thing. I'd rather be more of what they call an auteur than a standard comic book artist, because I'm more free. I'm more allowed to be myself. And Micronauts was a great training ground because it taught me how to be on time. I did it for like 3 years. It taught me to be on time, how to adapt a script, how to know when to put in some of yourself, know when to put in what the story needs. But it also taught me that I didn't want to do it if this is how it was supposed to be. That I had to be myself. And even if that meant I never did art again, if I'm going to do art, I have to do me, not just what someone expects. And I love the Micronauts to this day. I'm very happy that it has a following. I'm very happy that they're still popular. I'm not as embarrassed by my work as I used to be because I was so young and I didn't know what I was doing. I look back now and I go, that young man had a lot of bravery to do that,
Yeah.
And I had good people. I had good people around me helping me.
Yes, that's a very interesting point because we always think that is a change food where everybody's trying to go up the ladder
Yeah.
and put it back. The young fellows trying to.
Well, a lot of people become forgotten if they do what other people tell them to do. they're look how many people do this and how few you remember, or how few are influential, or how few touch you. It's
Yeah.
very, very few. And that's true in my when I read comics as a boy, they're very few. I think there were more people who were personal when I was growing up, had their own style. But I think that's because you worked alone. A lot of people worked alone. They didn't see all the things we see now. So you had a lot more individualists, uh, which I think is still a loss. I wish we had more individualists, because it would be hard for me to tell a young artist now how to break in, because I was accepted because they did look for differences. They didn't look for similarities. They didn't want a herd. They wanted the lone animal. So so I always appreciated the people around me, because I didn't, as much when I was younger, getting the jobs or being allowed to do these, as I got older, realize what risks they took in putting me on a monthly Batman, or handling Sandman, or handling Deadman, any of these things. As I didn't think they were radical or different. I thought they were pretty much normal to me. Now that I look back, I go, they were very different and very radical. And I was very fortunate to never have the kind of ego that needed people to like what I did. I was very understanding if they didn't. Um, uh, I could, all I needed people to do was to give it a chance. And if they liked it, by giving it a chance, fine. And if they didn't, but they gave it a chance, that was okay too.
Bien. Jorge.
Hola, ¿cómo les va? ¿Cómo le va, Mr. Jones? Otro gran admirador de su arte.
Nice meeting you, Ore.
La pregunta que iba a hacer ya de por sí fue en parte contestada. Esa elaboración que hizo para DC Comics del personaje de Deadman realmente pasó de ser un personaje sufrido a ser un personaje que a los lectores realmente nos asustaba, realmente asustaba ver esa imagen de Deadman. Y la pregunta es, ¿cómo fue esa etapa de transición, pasar del Opera Space al terror? ¿Cómo nosotros, los lectores, los que admiramos su arte, pasamos de ver historias de ciencia ficción a historias donde realmente, cuando éramos más jóvenes, sentíamos miedo de ver esos personajes en la oscuridad, alumbrados simplemente con una linterna? ¿Cómo fue esa transición del Opera Space al terror?
Yes. Jorge would like to ask that about the Dead Man, where you make some kind of leap between space opera to horror.
Yeah.
And what was like? How do you feel? Where did you find your insights to make the transition to make a redefinition of the Dead Man as a character who definitely caused fear?
What had happened was, like I'd said, the DC asked if I would come over and work for them, and they'd offered me a few things that were more superhero. The artist who was to do Dead Man quit, so they were late. The book was going to be late. So when they called me, they said, "We know this isn't fair, but would you be interested in doing this? We need it really, really fast." And I thought, wow, this is great. This is a character I could do. When I got it, I tensed up and froze, because all I could see was Neil Adams' great version, or Jim Apato's great version.
Yes.
And I tried the first day or so, the first page or two I drew, first page in particular, I drew kind of like regular superhero style. And
Yes.
when I got up the next morning to look at what I had done, I hated it because it looked so inferior to the stuff that I had known with him. And so I spent the rest of the day thinking, how do I do this? Because I'm not liking the results here, and they need it very quickly. And like that great moment of inspiration came, it said, take his name literally, draw him as a dead man. No one's done that. He wears the makeup and he's a ghost, but draw him as though he were a corpse and see what happens. So I drew it was an 8-page story, one of several that I had to do. And I drew it as if he were a corpse. And then I started to think, because I was thinking, if someone is an alcoholic, if someone is a drug addict, it starts to affect their body. Maybe loneliness does the same thing. So the loneliness was making him look this way. He's a corpse. He's very, very lonely. He has no connection to anything other than he watches people. And that made the drawings happen. That made the look of the character happen on its own. I just was there drawing it, but it drew itself. And I drew it. I didn't tell them I was going to do that. I turned it in thinking they were going to fire me. I honestly did. And the strange thing was I did not hear from the editor for that. I turned it in. I thought, well, when you're freelance or when you're doing these things and you don't hear from the people, you think the worst. You think, it's terrible. And so what happens with me when I don't hear anything like that, it made me angry. So I said, I'm going to even do it more. So I'm doing the next story and I'm like, just doing it now, thinking, well, even if they fire me, I can always say, this is what I meant. This is how I feel. So it wasn't so much I got better. It's just I got to be myself. I knew how to do this now because I had done Micronauts and whatnot for the past few years. So I knew how to do it. I knew how to do it the way they would want to do it, but I also knew how I wanted to do it. And I knew that the imagery I would come up with would be very unique. And not better than anybody. It would be my vision. So that way I didn't have to look like Neil Adams and I didn't have to look like Jim Aparo. Great though they are. And so finally the editor gets a hold of me after I turned in the second one. And I finally said, is this okay? And she said immediately, well, if it wasn't, I'd tell you. It's fine. This is really nice. I wouldn't buy it, but other people probably will because I like straight superhero, but I can understand and see something's going on here. So I'm staying out of the way and you just do what you want. And that's the best thing I was ever told, was someone telling you, it's not how I see it, but keep doing it and go further. And at that point, I always figured that's when my career really started. I went to school at Marvel and then got a job at DC, got to be who I was at DC. And Deadman was the thing that opened the door where Archie Goodwin and Denny O'Neil, Doug Mensch, Neil Gaiman, all of them saw this. Mike Barron was going around saying how good it was. I found out years later how many other artists were going in and having the editor make them copies of my pencils and the inks in full size because they hadn't seen it either. But when I lived where I lived 3,000 miles away, and I never knew the reaction from other peers. I never knew what they may have thought because I lived in a very rural farming community drawing. So all the people I knew didn't even read comics or anything. I mean, they had no idea. So it was many years later that I realized it. But at the time, it got a very good reaction from a different fan base who were looking for the things I was doing, who wouldn't have probably bought it if it not for how it looked. And then when they read it, they went, "This is pretty interesting." DC was doing Dead Man. In America, you have to publish so often to keep the copyright of a character. So they were only putting out these Dead Man books simply to keep the copyright. They didn't expect to make any money or have it do any business or get any awards or anything. So when that happened, I got a lot of credit for that, and it opened the door and gave me a lot of jobs. I always, again, I keep saying it, but I would tell young artists, don't try to get Batman or Superman or Spider-Man. Try to get the characters no one cares about and
Yes.
do something with them and make something happen to where people are forced to go to a character they wouldn't otherwise be interested in. And that is, again, since nobody at the company really cared, you're allowed to be free. You know, David Cronenberg said famously that when he did the movie The Dead Zone, the studio didn't care. They were more concerned with other films. So he got to be himself, and then everyone saw how he would do things. He got to be, and that's that. There's a lot of freedom in nobody in a publisher not caring.
Sí, me recuerda un poco lo que decía Todd McFarlane cuando él comenzó en Infinity Inc., que él decía que podía dibujar lo que quería, básicamente porque era un cómic que a nadie le importaba y por lo tanto tenía más libertad artística para dibujar Infinity Inc.
Fernando, add that your words remind him
Todd
the
McFarlane,
excuse me?
Todd McFarlane, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
Doug McFarlane for Infinity, that he said that nobody cares about his job, so he had no boundaries to express himself and do his job as the ink goes on.
Right. If people that are hiring you really care about something, you'll have too many opinions and it will make you second guess yourself and you'll question what you're doing. When you have something where you don't hear from anyone, and I wasn't, you're free. And then every day is a pleasure to see, well, how do I entertain myself? How do I make this interesting to me? If I was just a reader, how is this interesting? And I knew I was doing something with Dead Man that was very, very different. That time I knew. I looked at it, I said, yeah, that's why I thought they weren't going to allow for it. But that was my fault. I should understand that they're looking for something new too. It's just hard for people to break out of their conceptions of how something should be. Once they get that thing, that book or that art or that's different, it's a shock. It's like, oh, what is this? But it has to be, and if they pursue it, they'll realize that this isn't done just to be different, but there's a real sincere point of view in telling that story or presenting it. They'll follow you along. I went into it not to be shocking. I went into it because I believed in it. And then it became, also it was very difficult for people to be influenced by it too, because it wasn't just drawing him dead. I had him doing all kinds of weird things. So I was really the only one who was capable of doing it. I saw a few artists try to draw him that way and they did well, but it was how I did it. And so at that point it became like there's Dead Man and then this smaller group where you say, and then there's Kelley Jones's Dead Man. Well, you always want your name associated. I was lucky to have Kelley Jones's Sandman or Kelley Jones's Batman. It would always be because I did it this certain way. And after a while, it's a good stereotype because then they know what they're getting when they hire you. It used to be I used to have to not tell them what they were going to get. Now they know what they're going to get. And that makes it very freeing creatively. It means that if there's a thing that I'm very pleased about is Dead Man is coming on, will almost be 40 years ago. Because I started doing it in 87 or 88, and it's still around. I mean, it's still talked about. Um, the vampire Batman as a vampire, Red Ring, is still around. They're going to put it in a big fancy hardcover book after all those years. And then you try to think, well, how many times does that happen? And it gets to be very few where something still has the power of its initial telling. Its initial release is still there. I would always tell people when they ask me, what's your favorite thing you did? That's always hard. I always lean to Dead Man only for the fact I was completely left alone for a year. Nobody was there. I would draw a big chunk of pages, about 30 pages, turn them in. Nobody said anything. And then it came out and went. I had no idea it would do any business. But I think freedom is one of those things that, especially as an artist, where you're shocked at how frightening that is, but how good it is. You know, does anyone care? I don't care. You know. And then when you find out they do care, you go, "Wow, that mattered that they cared." You know, I didn't know. There's a thing with artists. I spoke with this to Bernie Wrightson once, and I had said, you know, you must have felt sad when they were going to release, with the first time anyone was going to see all your Frankenstein artwork, because you were alone with it for so long. And now everybody would own it. In their heads, everyone would have an opinion, whereas you were alone with this. And he said, you're the first person to have said that. How did you know? And I said, because I felt that way with Dead Man. I was alone with it for about a year, a little over a year and a half. And then I realized it's going to go out. My baby's going to go out into the world. The same thing happened with the first time I did Batman. I went, oh, when people see this, they're going to get upset. Some did. But during that time when it's just me and my baby, it's magic. And that I would want that for any writer or any artist. Never think what's going to happen. Just enjoy it while you're there. It's such a it's being awake. You're awake, but you're dreaming, you know? And that's what Dead Man was. That it was that transformative. I knew all that because I'd read everything that Stanley Kubrick said about making a film, or like I said, David Lynch, or any of those guys. Uh, Alfred Hitchcock said the worst part about making a movie was making it. The thinking about it was great. The planning was great. The making was boring. And that started to happen to me because I'd go, oh, I have all these ideas, and I'd get them all ready, and then I had to do it, you know. But I prefer working that way.
Absolutely. Yes. It's a very good piece of advice, not only for the youngsters, but even for the seniors like me.
Well, Pablo, no matter where you come from, I come from Northern California, you're in Argentina. That's the same thing. We all connect on that same thing. So whether it's cultural or whatever it is, we all connect on that. And all artists, all people who do this, we're also fans. We also read all these things. We're also into it. So that's how it connects the world. I've always been a big believer. It's art that does that. We all love Michelangelo. I mean, he lived 500 years ago and was an Italian, and okay. But we all look at it and go, wow, the sheer force of creation in that man. Well, I'm only doing comics, but I feel it the same way. And I think that connects to everybody. Everyone, I think the fear of someone's reaction to it, I'll leave that to the editors and the publishers. But for us, that's not our job. Our job is to make ourselves happy. Just produce. We have to produce, but make ourselves happy, and wonderful miracles happen.
Amazing. Amazing. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I mean, we're all honest with ourselves. I was always honest with myself that I would not be the draftsman, say, of a Neil Adams or a John Byrne or whatever. I knew I couldn't. I didn't want to be. Uh, but I knew I had the ideas to compete with them.
Yeah. Fernando, your next time.
Yes. Um, la etapa Kelley Jones Batman es hoy conocida como una de las mejores etapas de Batman. En el momento en que esos números salieron, yo los estaba leyendo en ese momento porque tengo cierta edad y miraba las cartas de los lectores y los lectores aplaudían, pero también había algunos lectores que se quejaban de la exageración en la capa de Batman o en las orejas de Batman. Mi pregunta es, ¿DC Comics le hacía llegar esos cuestionamientos de lectores a Kelley?
Okay. Fernando say that your work, as we were discussing, your work in Batman is now, after a few years, considered definitive in one of the character best period. Fernando said that he read the comics by your hand when at the time they were published, and he remembered that reading the reader's letters, somebody was very happy, but many readers complain about some aspect of Batman, like being an exaggeration, like for instance, the cape or the pointed ears. The question itself is if at DC Comics was trying to limit you in your style at that time, or even did they send you these comments, or just
No, they did.
they didn't care?
No, what was good about that time was, I mean, I'd been around long enough to know that this would probably make a reaction. What I knew was what I told them once, and they liked this, was I said, you know, it'd be nice to have the reaction be on the creative staff rather than the event of the character. Let's get it back to basics and get people into this. So there would be, they asked me once, they said, well, uh, do you have any problem if there's people who don't like it? I said, no, not at all. And if you don't, there has to be. And if you don't publish it, I will feel that would offend me that someone would not get to give their opinion. I said, I'm a human being. There's things I like and I don't like. I said, but here's what I want. The reason, it's a selfish reason I want this. It isn't to be magnanimous and say I have no ego. I said, I want people to know that if an artist can't create a polar reaction, yes or no, they're not an artist. If everyone likes it, they're of the moment and they'll be forgotten. So you have to have that. The other thing that's the most rewarding to an artist is someone who tells you, and this was personal, I don't like what you do when you did it, but now I love it. I changed my mind because you were sincere. What you put down, you believed in. And that force happened. I can tell you that I've had 2 editors at DC doing Batman things who did not like my Batman when they were kids, but then realized that was their favorite Batman and came to hire me to do that character. Twice that happened there. I've had so many people tell me I used to not, and then I do. And that's the ones I keep. I got rid of my collection, but I kept those. Or those are the ones that are overall, our sales went up. So I knew I was okay. The sales did very well during my 3 years. And what happens too is people who don't like you, and this is, I tell people all the time, people who don't like you have an emotion and they're being honest. And they'll say, people who love what you do, they're happy. They don't have to say anything. They're buying it. Why would they? Right? They're going to go pick that up and read it. And then, okay. So the happy people rarely say anything. As it stands now, I'm so much luckier than most artists because I would ask for an opinion through my work. I didn't want to just be known for technical. I wanted them to think. Why does he have long ears? Why does he have a strange cape? Why is everything at night? Why? Rather than just accept it and then dispose of it. Just, the people who liked my stuff never walked away. The people who changed their mind never walked away. They still consider it a big, influential period of Batman. I've always been grateful that my version has lasted through all the years and is still considered one of the definitive versions. But I never started doing it thinking that's what I wanted. I wanted to, like anyone, I wanted to enjoy my day working. I wanted to feel like I wasn't at a job. And the best way to do that is to do what your heart tells you.
Right.
And then whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
Bien.
Amazing.
I was very lucky in that Denny O'Neil did call me once in the middle of all of it, doing it. And he says, I just want you to know, I do think you're doing something special. I didn't know if that meant good or bad. He says, but I think it's different. And he says, I think it's special. And that's all he said. The other thing he said that was good was he told me, in particular, he told me, and I don't know why he said it. He just says, never worry about what you do. I'm the one who sells it. You're the one who makes it. Then a friend of mine told me who worked with Denny O'Neil as well, said, you got to remember he was very different when he started, when he did it with Neil Adams. It went from kind of silly stories to very serious stories. And people didn't know what to do with that. Very, very serious Batman stories with Neil Adams. And he says, so he understands going against the grain or going into your own beliefs and how to be a creator. And he says, I every time he spoke about you, he put you in that category of this guy's on his own. And that's my job to make sure, I worked for Denny for about 10 years while he was there. And never did he tell me to do something. Never did he say anything. What he appreciated was I was doing it my personal way, and I was always on time. I was never late. And that's the two things that a publisher wants.
Yes.
And he was the one who said, and that takes a lot of pressure off you. I'll sell it, you make it. And he did. We sold great numbers.
Absolutely. Yes. All right, Jorge, your time.
Mi pregunta va más dirigida a los colaboradores, a los que estuvieron con él en el trabajo, en su arte, más que nada específicamente los entintadores. ¿Con cuál fue con el que él considera el mejor compañero la mejor dupla para complementar sus lápices?
Okay. Jorge asked, through the years, you probably work with many inkers, so this is a very special relationship between the artist and the inker. And he would like to know if you have some of them, you prefer some of them, of what was your relation, if they can catch the insight you're trying to put in your representation of your as an artist of your characters?
Well, I would say starting as an inker, I
Yes.
love inkers. I consider myself still more as an inker than a penciler. Um, what I always ask of an inker is the only direction I give them is to see what I'm doing and go further. Be brave, try things. Don't worry about a mistake. The lines don't have to be perfect. Just capture the energy of what I'm trying to put down. Realize I think that I the inkers I've dealt with have loved that because I'm speaking inker language to them. I'm not saying replicate every line perfectly. I'm saying make it if you can, because the ink line is the thing that people see. They don't see the pencils. And I've always told pencilers that I see, if they ask, I go, I don't shade everything in. Why waste my time? And I don't make every little line. Why make it? It doesn't work that way. What you want is to give energy to the inker. And he has to be the guy. It's like a film editor. I make the film, but the editor's got to make it work. So you want them as free as possible. I don't want an inker spending all 2 days on a page. I want him to get it done in 4 or 5 hours because there's an energy. And if you slow it down, it becomes the same. Everything starts looking the same. So all I ask an anchor to do is if it's wood texture, do the wood. If it's water, make it look like water. If it's metal, metal. Flesh, flesh. Just think in those terms how the best the lines make that happen. I would add to it, I always tell colorists, black is a color. Don't compete with it. Don't go dark because I'm dark. Be brighter. When I'm drawing Dracula right now, I always say be brighter because I'm very dark, but be brighter, brighter, brighter. It makes it darker. That's the irony. The brighter the color on a dark thing, the more beautiful it will look. Dario Argento or Mario Bava, very dark but very bright at the same time, and it makes their stuff seem much, much creepier. So
Yes.
I'm a very easygoing collaborator. I don't tell a writer what to write. I don't tell an inker how to ink other than be more of whatever they want to be. Surprise me, but don't feel they have to copy me. Tell colorists be bright. Try a new palette. Uh, don't because a computer can do it doesn't mean we have to do it. Think simple four color and pow. I'm not against realism. I think realism is good, but I'm much more into interesting. And interesting can be anything. Interesting can be over the top, it can be whatever. I can get realism all the time, but interesting's hard. That's very hard to get. That's much harder to get. I think that's why people go to realism is, well, they can replicate it.
Mhm.
But interesting is that indefinable thing we're all grasping to get. I still am. I still am looking for it myself. Um, and so that I think what we need is a return to the philosophy that art is from the heart and that it comes from these places that we don't know where it is. So I mean, I'm big on telling anyone I work with uh, when we start to talk about it, how do we do this, whether it be an inker or writer or whatever, is I think you have to be very happy. You have to be your life has to be a happy life. It has to be, you have to have a lot of rest. You can't live like what they think an artist is. That's tough. And that way you can do the scariest stuff there is. You can do the most horrible things on a page, but if you're in a good mood, if you're energized, if you want to do it. I don't want to be depressed and sad and all those things. So I try to get everything I'm saying is energy. So I want the inker to be free and everyone to be free. We'll see what we get. I mean, if I'm inking myself, I know what I'm going to do. If I have someone come in and I don't want them to do what I do, I want them to do what they do.
Oh, absolutely great.
Nuestra última pregunta para Kelley Jones, agradeciéndole su tiempo, es sobre el personaje que él inventó, que él creó, que es The Hammer. Mi pregunta sería, que es una obra hermosa, que aparte tiene sus marcas estilísticas y también tiene su humor, porque tiene mucho humor la obra de Kelley Jones. Y mi pregunta sería, ¿cómo llegó a crear ese personaje?
Fernando is talking about your own character, the Hammer, that besides horror has a lot of humor.
Yeah.
And this is another particular point, or as the French say, souligner about your work. And how do you get to this creation of yours? Where you find it?
Well, for me, it was the fact that I find that humor in something horrific, they always say relieves the tension. For me, it's unintentional. Humor should be unintentional. It should just be there. It should be that we find it funny, but it may not be funny to the people going through it. So when I did the Hammer, there was many things going on. One, uh, I didn't think the idea of the black and white of a situation was ever explored very well. And even though the outcome was good or what you wanted, how you got there could be pretty savage, pretty brutal. And I wanted a hero who was, I don't know if he was a hero in the strict sense, but I like the idea that you were uncomfortable being around him. Not because even how he looked, you don't know what he would do. Anything to win could mean I'm sacrificed. Anything to win could mean what? Especially, and I like the idea that being an outsider, the character being an outsider, he could criticize what he saw or compliment what he saw, but it'd be very different than our way of looking at it. What he would see as a good thing or a bad thing might surprise us. And that's from my own experiences going through school and stuff, where you would see things and you go, oh, that's awful, but then the results were very good, or that's wonderful, but that's a good thing, but it's very destructive in its application, whatever that is. So I thought that would make an interesting character. The fact of using Lovecraftian stuff is I always liked, if there's a thing I like in H.P. Lovecraft or writers like him or Algernon Blackwood or certainly Arthur Machen, is that they take the world you know and change it to where the perceptions you have are not true, or which causes an existential thing where all of a sudden everything you thought isn't that way. And so that would mean, then what are we here for? What does it mean? Whatever. At the same time, I wanted that character to be corrupted by us saying, well, I like the way I see things, that it was a two-way street. It wasn't like my hero who had these terrible ways of doing things, but victory was achieved, also was being affected by us saying, well, he was starting to become aware of why we are the way we are, flaws and all. And in that is a lot of humor. In that, the fact I wanted a character who on the side had to eat completely different than the way they tell you to, because he, as an alien, needed that. So that was kind of funny because he would base how he got around to do his work by how many restaurants he wanted to go to on the way. That just because he needed it for his nutrition, but it's funny because it was opposite of how they would say you live. And that to me was funny because it changes all the time. They'll tell you what to eat one year, the next year don't eat that. I mean, it always changes. So that would be funny. The fact though that he may have to amputate your foot and and that's just the way it is. And he'll look at you like, why are you upset? It saved the world, but he didn't ask permission. He just did it. And I think a lot of us always feel at odds with the world, with what's going on around you. We just are floating down the stream. And that's what this guy was, the stream, the fact that you never really knew what he looked like. He was in a body that was in another body that possessed that body. And we don't know where he comes from, what he does, why he's doing it. All we know is that what he's fighting, we would fight if we knew it existed. And once we become aware of it, and that kind of humor and that kind of horror, I always think go really well together. It's like the salty and the sweet, they go together. And I will be doing more of that character. As I've got older, there's more that I want to do. Initially, it came out as my kind of polemic about comics and culture and all that. And that some stuff we criticize is actually good, and some stuff that we love is actually bad. That's growing. That's the growth of it. And I always felt this character didn't care about our current stuff. He saw the gigantic picture, and he would always end his arguments when his compatriots would complain to him about that. He would say, well, you do realize all of us taste good to Cthulhu, so we don't want to be eaten, right? So everything is to stop that, and then we can argue about the rest. And I thought, yeah, that's it. It's for a black and white character, he was very much more complex about what we're doing in good and evil. And that was interesting to me.
Yeah. I got one last question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Because being a horror writer, and we are about more or less the same age. So yeah, as you say, we grew up with the similarities, no matter if you live in a farm in the Midwestern, or I live in the south end of the subcontinent. Yeah. Anyway, we grew up with the same nutritious stuff. We read, we enjoyed. And you, like a resume of your career, you started like an inker, then you a penciler, and right now you are a writer,
right?
Horror writer,
right?
In my case, is backwards. I started always as a horror writer. I study script and horror film direction, and now for the last 5 or 8 years, I'm writing a script. One of my passions. I have the age to make me happy doing whatever I want. Yeah. So I go to the comics, but just always writing the script. In your case, many artists struggle to shift from drawing to writing. What were the creative or even personal challenge that you faced when stepping into horror prose, and how did you overcome them?
Well, again, I was lucky in that studying film and literature, what I would always see, or people would struggle with, where do the ideas come from? And when you absorb all this stuff in, it starts building up in you. I began to trust my dreams. I began to trust the dreams I would have, my daydreaming, really, because I don't remember my sleeping dreams, but I do daydream a lot. And I think that's like uh, kind of a meditation, though it's not an organized or whatever. It's just kind of that way. Daydream. I used to daydream all the time and get ideas. Or I'll just be driving along and something will pop in my head. What I think anyone creative has to do is begin to trust that. And you begin to go to that source rather than look outside for something. We're we're the sum of all the things that we loved. And then real life teaches you what to fear for. You fear for your children, or you fear for your friend, the real, those kind of things. Or you love this, or you don't like. I mean, those things start to filter in too. And by that, you have to produce, like I said all the time, you have to either draw or write all the bad work out of yourself. The doing of a thing gets it out of you. And then you begin to edit yourself down until you get to the core of what it is. However you want to tell it, then whatever style you want, then you use that. And that's what happened to me, was I would go, well, wait a minute, in this movie or in this book, they glossed over something that it would stop me, that would upset me, right? If I see a character without a face, I'm not going to talk to it. I'm going to be freaking out over they don't have a face. And I would say they don't have a face. And I used that in one of my stories once. It stopped everything. I also know that when people are, or real life, there's stories within stories. There's the story, but then there's little things that happen. You throw out the ones that don't help, but the little ones I do like, and they do help tell it. So it's like you stop for a moment and tell this story, and then you realize later, oh, that wasn't a diversion. It tells that was personal to me. Now, I know they say that's wrong to do, but for me it worked, where I would do that, and these little stories would affect the bigger picture. You can do that in comics. It's probably more difficult to do it in a novel or a film, but in comics, which makes them so interesting, is you can stop everything and say, oh, look at this for a bit, and then come back to it. And when you come to the end, it all works. And that's what for example, the Hammer was all completely wrong ways to present a story, but when it was done, it all came together. And then you realize, for us, it's always a thing of, well, I want to be entertained, right? I want to be thrilled. I want all those things, but I also want to walk away with something that enriches myself. So when I work, I'm thinking, well, that's what I want, so I got to put it down. I put it all on paper, and I do it on a notebook, and I'll cross out and I'll do, sir. I want that there. I don't want to delete something. I want to see my process. Because sometimes I'll go back and go, the idea I didn't think is actually going to work. So I want all my messiness on paper. And I think that's a thing that, on a side note, I think novels aren't as good because they're written on computers now rather than physically written out, where someone can make a mistake and then correct it and then tweak it, and it doesn't go away. So I wanted all that stuff. I wanted my people three-dimensional. I wanted them to not always be right. I wanted them to be right even though they're wrong. I wanted, when they're wrong, to be the correct thing, but where do we lose or gain our humanity? There's all these very messy questions. And then, of course, the monsters and the mayhem and all that kind of stuff. So rather than get overwhelmed by that, I would say, here's where I start, here's where I end. In between these two, I have to have 7 great moments. Come up with them. Then stitch them all together. And whatever comes into mind, oh, that would be neat to see. How do I get there? Well, I'll figure it out. But I want to see that. So I always tell a writer that write whatever you want, but give me several good scenes and we'll figure it out. Because that's movies. Movies are that way. So I want that kind of structure. There's structure, but no rules. So I can love a standard television sitcom, or I can love David Lynch's Blue Velvet, because they're both got their agendas and they both can achieve them. And so I'm not, I don't want to go into it, anything creative saying I'm an elite. I want anyone to go in there saying, yeah, I'm with you. I get this. I don't understand it either. Or, hey, this is my experience. And then you do it that way. People connect. We all, since Homer, we all want to sit there with our wine and listen to someone tell us a great story. So if I'm going to tell the story, I got to make them interested. So I got to put the exploitation in, but then I also got to put the literature in. You know, the pulpy stuff keeps them listening, and then the poignant stuff makes them break their heart. And that's the trick. And whether I'm drawing or writing, that's what I do.
You nail it. You nail it.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Bueno, entonces aprovechamos para decirle a Kelley Jones que agradecemos muchísimo, muchísimo su tiempo. Para nosotros ha sido un enorme honor hablar con él. Esperemos en algún futuro poder volver a hablar con él. Y creo que tanto Jorge como yo, nos hemos controlado bien dentro de todo. Y nada más, simplemente agradecerle muchísimo su tiempo y decirle que ha sido a great, great honor to talk with him.
Muchísimas
Kelley,
gracias.
for all of us, it's been an absolute honor, a privilege to explore the shadows with you today. Your work not only has redefined what horror can look like, but now also what it can say.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your vision, your process, above all, your passion, and your piece of advice for all of us and for all the people who will be watching us. We'll be watching and reading whatever dark path you take next, and we really will be honored if one day in the future we have you again for this media to know much more a lot where you up to. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
You were very generous.
Absolutely, I'll come back if you want. That this has been very, very good. A lot. You guys asked a lot of very good questions.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go with all our admiration, because we really do that. It's not just for the saying, for the sake of saying. We do love your job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Very much.
And see you next time. Bye-bye.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
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 Bye bye. Bye bye.